The Violin of Auschwitz, Act I. December 1943. Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, German-occupied Poland. Snow falls on electrified wire, on guard towers, on barracks housing thousands of dying prisoners. The camp is operating at peak efficiency now, trains arriving daily from across occupied Europe, gas chambers working around the clock, crematoria burning continuously. This is Auschwitz at its most lethal, the machinery of genocide refined to industrial precision, death delivered systematically to people whose only crime is existing. Block 12, men's barracks in Auschwitz I, the main camp. 200 prisoners crammed into space designed for 50, sleeping 3 to a bunk, sharing disease and lice and slow starvation. The block holds mostly Polish political prisoners and Soviet POWs, men who've survived months or years through luck and mutual support and stubborn refusal to die. Among them is prisoner number 87342, a man the SS records identify as David Klein, age 42, arrested in Krakow in 1942, charged with underground activities, sentenced to indefinite imprisonment. But the number and the record don't capture who Klein really is. Before the war, before the occupation, before Auschwitz, he was David Kleinman, professional violinist with the Krakow Philharmonic Orchestra. First chair, soloist occasionally, musician of genuine talent and dedication. He studied at conservatory in Vienna, performed across Europe, lived for music the way others live for family or God or country. The violin was his voice, his identity, his reason for existence. The SS took his violin when they arrested him. Standard procedure: confiscate all possessions, reduce prisoners to absolute deprivation. The violin went into some warehouse probably, stolen by a guard eventually, sold or destroyed or forgotten. Klein tried not to think about it during his first months in Auschwitz, tried to focus on survival, on obtaining food, on avoiding selections, on lasting another day. But at night, in the frozen barracks, lying awake because sleep wouldn't come, he heard music in his mind, phantom performances of pieces he'd played hundreds of times, the violin singing in memory even though the instrument was gone. Music sustained him psychologically when physical sustenance was minimal. In his mind, he played Brahms and Beethoven and Bach, performed concerts for imaginary audiences, practiced scales and arpeggios with fingers that existed only in memory. The other prisoners thought he was going insane, mumbling to himself, his fingers moving rhythmically against his thigh, conducting invisible orchestras. But Klein was sane, maybe the only truly sane person in the block, maintaining his humanity through art while others descended into animal survival. Then, in late November 1943, something changed. Klein was assigned to a new work detail, the Effektenlager, the warehouse where prisoner belongings were sorted. Mountains of possessions, suitcases and clothing and personal items, everything confiscated from arriving prisoners before they were sent to the gas chambers. The SS called it Canada, this warehouse of stolen goods, because Canada represented wealth and plenty in German imagination, and the warehouse held riches beyond measure, everything stripped from hundreds of thousands of murdered people. Working in Canada was desirable assignment by Auschwitz standards. The prisoners who sorted belongings could steal food from suitcases, extra clothing for warmth, occasionally valuables to trade with corrupt guards. The work was indoors, protected from weather, less physically demanding than construction or stone quarry. Klein was assigned there through random selection, luck in a place where luck usually meant the difference between dying today versus dying tomorrow. His second day in Canada, sorting through a pile of suitcases from a recent transport, Klein found something that stopped his heart. A violin case. Battered leather case, scuffed and water-stained, but unmistakably designed for violin. He opened it with shaking hands, knowing the instrument inside probably belonged to someone recently gassed, that this violin's owner was already dead, reduced to ash, his music silenced forever. The violin inside was damaged. The bridge was broken, one string was missing, the bow had lost most of its horsehair. But the instrument itself was structurally intact, the wood sound, the body undamaged. It could be repaired, could be made functional, could produce music again if someone with knowledge and skill worked on it carefully. Klein looked around the warehouse, confirming no guards were watching, then carefully hid the violin case under a pile of coats, marking its location mentally. He couldn't take it immediately, too risky, too obvious. But he could return, could retrieve it later, could attempt repair if opportunity presented itself. For the first time since his arrest, Klein felt something beyond mere survival instinct. He felt purpose, possibility, connection to the person he was before Auschwitz tried to erase him. Over the following week, Klein stole components for violin repair. A thin strip of wood from a furniture leg, suitable for crafting a new bridge. Wire from electrical scrap, strong enough to replace the missing string. Horsehair from a paintbrush, salvageable for the bow. Glue from a tube in someone's luggage, dried but potentially reconstitutable with water. He smuggled these items back to his barracks piece by piece, hiding them in his clothing, taking enormous risk because discovery meant punishment or death. The capo of Block 12 was named Henryk, a Polish political prisoner arrested in 1940, survivor of 3 years in Auschwitz through combination of ruthlessness and strategic collaboration with the SS. Henryk was brutal to prisoners under his authority, maintained order through violence, enforced German discipline without mercy. But he had certain principles, certain lines he wouldn't cross, and he protected skilled prisoners who proved useful to the block's collective survival. Klein approached Henryk carefully, explained what he'd found, what he planned to attempt. Henryk was skeptical initially, viewing violin repair as pointless luxury, waste of energy better devoted to survival. But Klein explained that music could provide morale, could give prisoners something beyond hunger and fear, could maintain humanity in place designed to destroy it. Henryk considered this argument, evaluated its merit, finally nodded permission with warning that Klein's project couldn't interfere with work assignments or endanger the block. Klein began repair work at night, after roll call, using the few hours before curfew when prisoners had minimal freedom to organize themselves. He worked by candlelight, precious candle stub traded from another prisoner, his fingers remembering skills learned decades ago in conservatory. Crafting a violin bridge requires precision, careful shaping of wood to exact dimensions, understanding of acoustics and tension and the physics of sound. Klein had the knowledge but not the tools, forced to improvise with broken glass as cutting edge, rock as hammer, his own fingernails as fine shapers. The bridge took 3 nights to complete. Crude work by professional standards, rough and irregular, but functional, properly sized and positioned. Klein fitted it carefully, adjusted the height, ensured proper spacing. Next came the string, fashioning replacement from the wire he'd stolen, wrapping it carefully, testing tension. The wire was wrong material, would produce harsh sound unlike proper gut or steel string, but it would vibrate, would create tone, would make music possible. The bow repair was most difficult. Attaching new horsehair required precise tension, specific technique, skills Klein possessed intellectually but struggled to execute with inadequate materials. He worked for a week on the bow, failing repeatedly, starting over, persisting through frustration. Other prisoners in the block watched with mixed fascination and incomprehension, unable to understand why anyone would devote energy to violin repair when that energy could be conserved for survival. But some understood. An older prisoner named Moshe, a rabbi from a village near Lublin, approached Klein one evening, watched him work for several minutes, finally spoke quietly. "You're not repairing a violin. You're repairing yourself. The instrument is just the method." Klein nodded slowly, recognizing truth in the observation. The violin was symbol, representation of life before Auschwitz, connection to identity the Germans tried to destroy. Repairing it was act of resistance, subtle but profound, assertion that he remained David Kleinman the musician, not just prisoner 87,342 waiting to die. 2 weeks after finding the violin, Klein completed the repairs. The instrument was ready, functional if imperfect, capable of producing sound. But playing it presented new challenges. Music was forbidden in the barracks, prohibited by SS regulations, any violation punishable by beating or worse. Klein would have to play secretly, quietly, during the brief evening window when guards were less attentive, when the block had minimal autonomy. He chose a night when the regular SS inspection had already passed, when Henrik confirmed the guards were occupied elsewhere. Klein took the violin from its hiding place under his bunk, positioned it properly, drew the damaged bow across the improvised strings. The sound that emerged was terrible, harsh and discordant, the wire string producing tone more metallic screech than musical note. But it was sound. It was music, however crude. It was proof that art could exist even here, even in Auschwitz, even surrounded by death and machinery of genocide. Klein adjusted his technique, compensated for the instrument's imperfections, found fingering and bowing that produced less harsh tone. He played scales first, simple exercises, remembering muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice. Then he attempted a melody, something simple and familiar, a folk tune from his childhood. The violin responded, the sound improving as he worked through the piece, his fingers finding positions, his bow arm recovering coordination. The prisoners in the block listened in absolute silence. Some had heard live music before, in their previous lives, in concert halls or churches or family gatherings. But hearing violin in Auschwitz, in Block 12, surrounded by death and horror, the experience was transcendent, transported them briefly to world before the war, before the camps, before everything was reduced to survival and suffering. Klein played for perhaps 10 minutes, stopping before the music could attract guard attention. He carefully returned the violin to hiding, his hands shaking from emotion and exertion. The prisoners remained silent, processing what they'd experienced, unable to articulate the complex feelings the music evoked. Moshe spoke finally, his voice quiet but carrying in the silent barracks. In the Talmud, it's written that when the temple was destroyed, music ceased in Israel. But here, in this place worse than any destruction, music continues. That means something. That means we're not destroyed yet. Klein nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by what he'd accomplished. He'd played violin in Auschwitz, had created beauty in place designed for ugliness, had asserted humanity in face of systematic dehumanization. It was small rebellion, practically meaningless in context of camp's massive death operation. But it was rebellion nonetheless, refusal to surrender completely, insistence that some part of him remained untouchable by German cruelty. Word spread through the camp's prisoner network, the invisible communication system that connected blocks and work details despite SS efforts to maintain isolation. Block 12 had a musician. Someone was playing violin. The news traveled quietly, passed in whispers during work assignments, shared through the complex sign language prisoners developed for silent communication. Within days, prisoners from other blocks were making requests, asking Henrik if they could hear the music, offering to trade food or other resources for the privilege of listening. Henrik saw opportunity in this interest, chance to improve his block's position, to obtain resources that enhanced survival for everyone under his authority. He established system, allowing prisoners from other blocks to visit during the evening period, charging small payments in food or cigarettes or useful items. Klein's concerts became regular events, held twice weekly, audience of perhaps 20 prisoners crowding into the block, listening in silence while Klein played his damaged violin with its wire strings and makeshift bridge. Klein played pieces from memory, drawing on repertoire accumulated over decades of professional performance. He played Brahms' Lullaby, Schubert's Ave Maria, traditional Jewish melodies, Polish folk songs, anything he could remember and reproduce on the damaged instrument. The music was technically imperfect, limited by equipment and conditions, but emotionally powerful, carrying weight beyond mere notes and rhythm. The audiences listened with desperate attention, absorbing every sound, every phrase, storing the experience as psychological sustenance against the camp's daily horrors. Some prisoners wept openly, tears streaming down their gaunt faces, overcome by emotion they'd suppressed for months or years. Others sat perfectly still, eyes closed, transported internally to memories of life before, of homes and families and world that no longer existed. The music couldn't change their circumstances, couldn't save them from gas chambers or disease or starvation. But it gave them something the Germans couldn't take, couldn't destroy, couldn't eliminate no matter how efficiently the camp operated. Then, in early January 1944, Klein's concerts attracted attention from unexpected source. A prisoner named Stefan, who worked as clerk in the SS administrative office, approached Klein after an evening performance. Stefan had access to information other prisoners didn't, knew about camp operations, understood SS planning. He brought warning and opportunity both. The SS know about the music, Stefan said quietly. They've heard reports, they're investigating. Some guards think it should be stopped, punished as unauthorized activity. But others are interested differently. They want to hear for themselves. Klein's blood froze. SS attention was death sentence usually, drawing notice from guards meant selection, punishment, elimination. But Stefan continued, explaining the complexity of the situation. There's a guard, Hauptscharführer Weber, who plays piano. He studied music before the war, considers himself cultured. He's curious about the violin, wants to know who's playing and how well. He might punish you. Or he might protect you, if he thinks the music is valuable. It depends on his mood, on his evaluation of your skill, on factors we can't predict. Klein understood the terrible gamble he faced. He could stop playing immediately, destroy the violin, eliminate evidence, hope the SS investigation would find nothing and move on. That was safe choice, survival-oriented decision, what logic dictated. Or he could continue, could take risk of SS discovery, could gamble that his music might find protector among the guards, that art might transcend the camp's brutal hierarchy. He chose to continue playing. Not from confidence in positive outcome, but from inability to surrender the violin again, to lose music twice, to accept silence after rediscovering his voice. If the SS would kill him for playing, then he'd die with violin in his hands, creating beauty until the end, refusing to submit completely to camp's crushing machinery. The next concert, 2 nights later, drew unusual audience. 20 prisoners as normal, crowding into Block 12, waiting in anticipation. But also, standing in the shadows near the door, a figure in SS uniform. Hauptscharführer Weber had come to hear the music for himself, to evaluate the prisoner who dared play violin in Auschwitz, to judge whether this violation of regulations deserved punishment or tolerance. Klein saw the SS guard, understood immediately who he was and what his presence meant. This moment would determine everything, would decide whether music continued or ended, whether Klein lived or died. He lifted the violin, positioned it properly, drew breath, and began to play. Not simple folk tune or familiar melody, but something more challenging, more complex, more revealing of his true skill. He played the opening movement of Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto, one of the repertoire's great works, demanding piece that required technical excellence and musical interpretation both. The damaged violin with its wire strings couldn't produce the piece properly, couldn't deliver the tone and dynamics Mendelssohn intended. But Klein's skill was evident despite the instrument's limitations, his musicality apparent in phrasing and expression, his training and experience clear in every note. He played for perhaps 5 minutes, enough to establish competence, enough to demonstrate he was genuine musician not amateur pretender. When he finished, the prisoners sat in stunned silence, awed by the performance, afraid to react because the SS guard's presence changed everything, made any response potentially dangerous. Weber stepped forward from the shadows, approached Klein directly, studied him with expression Klein couldn't interpret. Fear, respect, contempt, interest, impossible to distinguish. Weber spoke finally, his German precise and educated. "You studied where?" "Vienna Conservatory," Klein answered in German, his accent revealing native fluency despite years of deprivation. "I was first violin with Krakow Philharmonic before the war." Weber nodded slowly, processing this information. "That instrument is inadequate. The tone is terrible, the strings wrong. You can't perform properly with such equipment." Klein said nothing, unsure how to respond, whether this was criticism or statement of fact or prelude to punishment. Weber continued. "I will bring you proper violin. Decent instrument, correct strings, functioning bow. You will play for me twice weekly, in the administration building, where the acoustics are better and the environment more suitable. You will maintain your skill, will practice seriously, will perform repertoire appropriate to your training. Do you understand? Klein nodded, barely breathing, unable to fully comprehend what was happening. The SS guard wasn't punishing him. He was protecting him, was providing resources, was creating opportunity for music to continue and even improve. It was miraculous and horrifying simultaneously, salvation offered by representative of the system trying to kill him. Yes, Hauptscharführer, Klein managed. I understand. Thank you. Weber's expression hardened slightly. Don't thank me. This isn't mercy. I want to hear proper music, want to maintain my cultural education even here. You serve that purpose. If your playing is inadequate, if you waste my time, the arrangement ends and you return to regular prisoner status. Clear. Clear, Hauptscharführer. Weber left without another word, disappearing into the night, leaving Klein standing in the barracks holding his damaged violin, surrounded by prisoners who couldn't process what they'd witnessed. Henrik approached, spoke quietly. You just made a deal with the devil. This could save your life or destroy it. Maybe both. Be very careful how you proceed. Klein nodded slowly, understanding the truth in Henrik's warning. He'd become visible to the SS, had attracted patronage that was simultaneously protection and threat. Weber could shelter him from selections, could ensure better food and treatment, could maintain his survival indefinitely. But Weber could also kill him instantly if displeased, could withdraw protection leaving Klein more vulnerable than before, could use him as example if convenient for some SS purpose. But Klein had his music back. Had violin, even if damaged temporarily. Had opportunity to play, to practice, to maintain identity as musician rather than just prisoner. Whatever dangers accompanied this opportunity, whatever risks it created, he couldn't refuse. The music was worth it. The chance to remain himself, to preserve his soul while his body degraded, that was worth any risk. He returned the damaged violin to its hiding place, his hands shaking, his mind racing with implications of what just happened. Tomorrow, Weber would bring proper instrument. Tomorrow, Klein would play real violin again, would hear correct tone, would reconnect with his art through adequate equipment. Tomorrow, he would begin new phase of existence in Auschwitz, protected by SS guard who wanted private concerts, performing for murderer while thousands died around him. The moral complexity was overwhelming. But survival in Auschwitz required accepting moral complexity, living with contradictions, making compromises that would be unthinkable in normal world. Klein would play for Weber. Would perform beautifully, would maintain his skill, would give the German cultured entertainment he demanded. And in exchange, Klein would live, would preserve his music, would resist the camp's dehumanization through art even if that art served his oppressor. That night, lying in his bunk, unable to sleep, Klein thought about the violin's previous owner, the person who packed that instrument in a suitcase before boarding a transport to Auschwitz, who carried it hoping somehow music would survive, who died in gas chamber while his violin ended up in Klein's hands. What would that person think of Klein's bargain? Would he approve of the survival, of the music continuing? Or would he condemn the collaboration, the performance for SS audience? Klein would never know. The previous owner was dead, anonymous, reduced to ash and smoke. But his violin lived, repaired and soon to be replaced by better instrument, continuing to produce sound, to create beauty, to assert that music survived even in Auschwitz. That had to mean something. Had to justify the complicated moral bargain Klein was making. Because the alternative, silence and death and complete surrender, that was unacceptable. The music would continue. Whatever the cost. Whatever the price. The violin would play. The Violin of Auschwitz, Act 2. January 1944. Klein stands in the SS administration building, a structure outside the prisoner compound, heated and clean, furnished with stolen possessions from murdered Jews. The contrast with Block 12 is obscene, comfortable chairs and electric lighting and warmth while prisoners freeze in unheated barracks. Klein tries not to think about this, tries to focus on the music, on the instrument Weber has provided. The violin is exceptional, professional quality instrument, probably stolen from some Jewish musician's home in Vienna or Prague or Warsaw. It's a German-made violin from the 1920s, beautiful craftsmanship, perfect intonation, responsive to the slightest touch. The strings are correct, real gut strings properly installed, the bow is perfectly balanced with good horsehair tension. Playing this instrument after weeks on the damaged violin is revelation, like speaking fluently after months of forced silence. Weber sits in a leather armchair, smoking a cigarette, listening with closed eyes. He's perhaps 35 years old, educated, refined in manner despite the SS uniform and the death's head insignia. Before the war, he was a piano teacher in Munich, music his passion, until ideology and ambition led him to the SS, to Auschwitz, to participating in genocide while maintaining appreciation for Beethoven and Brahms. Klein plays Brahms' Violin Sonata in G major, a piece he performed countless times in his previous life, music that requires technical skill and emotional depth both. The administration building has good acoustics, the sound resonating properly, filling the space with warmth and beauty. It's surreal, obscene even, to create such beauty in a building devoted to administering murder, to play transcendent music for a man who helps operate gas chambers. But Klein plays anyway, losing himself in the music, focusing on interpretation and technique, allowing the violin to sing. This is what he does, who he is, his identity maintained through sound and rhythm and melody. The moral complexity can be processed later, can be wrestled with during sleepless nights in the barracks. Right now, he's playing Brahms, and playing it well, and that's enough. When he finishes, Weber opens his eyes, nods slowly. Acceptable. Your technique is solid despite months without practice. The interpretation is somewhat mechanical, lacking emotional depth, but that's understandable given your circumstances. Continue practicing. I expect improvement in subsequent performances. Yes, Hauptscharführer, Klein responds automatically, the prisoner's reflex of agreeing with everything the SS says. Weber reaches into his desk, pulls out a small package, tosses it to Klein. Extra bread ration. You need more calories to maintain playing strength. Can't have you collapsing from malnutrition mid-performance. Klein catches the package, feels the weight of the bread, understands this is significant survival advantage. Extra food means strength, resistance to disease, better chances of surviving selections. The music is literally keeping him alive, providing resources that separate him from the mass of dying prisoners. You will perform for me twice weekly, Weber continues. Tuesdays and Fridays, 1900 hours. Be prompt. Prepare different repertoire each time, no repetition. I'm not interested in hearing the same pieces endlessly. Challenge yourself. Remember your training. Perform as if you're still in concert hall, not prison camp. Understood? Understood, Hauptscharführer. Weber dismisses him with a wave. Klein carefully packs the violin into its case, a luxury he never imagined having again, cradles it carefully as he walks back toward the prisoner compound. Guards see him carrying the case, see the bread package, understand immediately that he has special protection. Some guards look envious, others disgusted, recognizing the arrangement for what it is, collaboration, survival through service to SS patrons. Back in Block 12, the other prisoners react with mixed emotions to Klein's new status. Some are grateful, understanding that his protection benefits the entire block, that Henrik can leverage Klein's position to obtain resources, that the evening concerts can continue and perhaps expand. Others are resentful, viewing Klein as collaborator, as someone who's chosen comfortable survival over solidarity with dying prisoners. Moshe approaches Klein that evening, speaks quietly while others can't hear. Some men in the block are angry. They think you're becoming capo, that you're serving the Germans, that you've crossed a line. They don't understand that survival requires compromise, that purity of principle is luxury none of us can afford. Klein nods slowly, understanding the criticism even if he can't fully accept it. I'm playing music. That's all. I'm not beating prisoners, I'm not selecting people for gas chambers, I'm not collaborating in their murder. I'm playing violin for one guard who happens to appreciate music. Is that truly unforgivable? Not to me, Moshe says. But not everyone distinguishes between degrees of collaboration. To some, any cooperation with the SS is betrayal. You need to be careful. Prisoners kill collaborators sometimes, when opportunity allows. The camp hierarchy is fragile, maintained through fear and violence. Your special status makes you vulnerable in unexpected ways. Klein processes this warning, recognizes its validity. He's become visible in camp where invisibility is usually safest, has attracted attention in place where attention means danger. Weber's protection shields him from SS arbitrary cruelty but creates new vulnerabilities among prisoner population. He must navigate both hierarchies carefully, must maintain position with Weber while not completely alienating fellow prisoners. The solution he develops is sharing. The extra bread rations Weber provides, Klein divides them among the block, giving portions to the weakest prisoners, to men on the edge of death from starvation. The act is strategic but also genuine, recognition that his survival depends on collective tolerance, on not being seen as exploiting position for purely personal advantage. He's privileged now by camp standards, but he'll share that privilege, will use it to help others when possible. He also continues the evening concerts in Block 12, now with the proper violin, creating events that prisoners from across the camp attend when possible. These performances are different from the private concerts for Weber, public rather than private, shared experience rather than individual entertainment. Klein plays differently for the prisoners, chooses different repertoire, focuses on pieces with emotional resonance rather than technical display. For the prisoners, he plays Jewish melodies, traditional songs from shtetls and synagogues, music that connects them to identity the Germans are trying to erase. He plays Polish folk songs, reminders of home for the political prisoners. He plays lullabies, beautiful simple melodies that evoke memories of childhood, of mothers and safety and world before the war. The music serves different purpose for prisoner audiences than for Weber. For Weber, it's aesthetic experience, appreciation of technical excellence and interpretive skill. For the prisoners, it's survival tool, psychological sustenance, reminder that they remain human despite everything the camp does to strip humanity away. Word of Klein's concert spreads beyond Auschwitz I into Birkenau, the larger extermination camp 2 kilometers away. Prisoners who work in both camps carry reports, describe the violinist who plays in the evenings, who creates beauty in the midst of death. Some of these reports reach the women's camp in Birkenau, where conditions are even worse than in Auschwitz I, where death rates are higher and survival more precarious. In late January, a message reaches Klein through the camp's underground communication network. A request from the women's camp. A young girl, perhaps 13 years old, is dying in the camp hospital. She was a music student before the war, studied violin in Budapest, dreamed of becoming professional musician. She's asked, through intermediaries, if the violinist in Auschwitz I could play for her, could let her hear real music one more time before she dies. The request is impossible. Klein can't leave Auschwitz I, can't travel to Birkenau without authorization, can't access the women's camp even if he could reach Birkenau. The camp's security systems prevent unauthorized movement, enforce separation between different sections. But the request haunts Klein, the image of dying girl asking to hear violin one last time, wanting music as final comfort before death. He discusses the situation with Henrik, explains the impossibility of fulfilling the request. Henrik considers the problem, then offers suggestion. You can't go to her. But maybe the music can. Weber has privileges, has access to transportation. If you asked him, explain the situation, maybe he'd allow something. Klein doubts this will work. Weber isn't sentimental, doesn't care about dying Jewish girls, wouldn't risk his position for humanitarian gesture. But he has nothing to lose by asking, and the girl has nothing to lose by his trying. During his next private performance, after finishing the scheduled repertoire, Klein mentions the request carefully, framing it as opportunity for Weber to demonstrate cultured sophistication, to show that even in Auschwitz, music can serve its highest purpose. Weber's response surprises him. The women's camp is outside my jurisdiction. I have no authority there. But I know the camp physician, Mengele. He appreciates music, attends concerts in Krakow when he has leave. I could mention your skills to him, suggest that musical performance might have therapeutic value for certain patients. If he's interested, he might arrange something. Klein feels cold horror at the mention of Mengele, the doctor whose medical experiments torture and kill prisoners, whose selections send thousands to gas chambers, whose name is spoken with terror throughout the camp. But Mengele is also cultured, educated, enjoys refined entertainments. The contradiction is typical of the SS, men who murder Jews while appreciating Jewish composers, who operate death factories while listening to Beethoven. I would be honored to play for Dr. Mengele's patients, Hauptscharführer, Klein says carefully, his stomach churning at the words, at the collaboration they represent. Music should serve healing wherever possible. Weber nods, makes a note. I'll speak with him. No promises. But if he's interested, I'll arrange transportation. 2 days later, Klein is summoned to the administration building. Weber informs him that Mengele has approved a performance, has arranged for Klein to visit the women's camp hospital, to play for selected patients including the dying Hungarian girl. Klein will be accompanied by guards, will have 30 minutes to perform, will return immediately after. The visit is scheduled for the following afternoon. Klein spends the night preparing mentally for what's coming, trying to understand what he's agreed to, what moral lines he's crossing. He'll be performing in Mengele's hospital, in the building where the doctor conducts his experiments, where prisoners are tortured in the name of medical science. His music will provide cover for horror, will create facade of civilization over systematic cruelty. But refusing means the dying girl never hears music, dies without the comfort she requested. The choice is impossible, the moral calculation defying clear answer. The next afternoon, guards escort Klein to Birkenau in a truck, the 2-kilometer journey taking only minutes. He sees the vast expanse of Birkenau for the first time, the enormous camp stretching across flatland, barracks arranged in geometric precision, the railway line running directly to the gas chambers, the crematoria smoking continuously. Auschwitz I is terrible, but Birkenau is industrial death, genocide operating at scale that overwhelms comprehension. The women's camp hospital is a barracks like any other, but designated for sick prisoners, women too ill to work, waiting for death or miraculous recovery. The conditions inside are nightmarish, women lying on bunks without mattresses, minimal medical supplies, disease spreading unchecked. The smell is overwhelming, human waste and infection and death. Mengele is waiting in the small office, wearing his SS uniform immaculately, his demeanor cultured and refined. He greets Klein with courtesy that would be appropriate in concert hall, completely inappropriate in death camp. Hauptscharführer Weber speaks highly of your skills. I'm interested to hear for myself. Music has therapeutic properties, reduces stress, improves patient morale. Perhaps regular performances could benefit our hospital operations. Klein nods silently, unable to respond verbally to the obscenity of Mengele discussing therapeutic music in the building where he tortures prisoners. Mengele leads him to a small room where perhaps 20 women are gathered, including the young Hungarian girl, skeletal and hollow-eyed, barely alive but conscious enough to understand what's happening. Klein unpacks the violin, positions it properly, prepares to play. He looks at the dying girl, sees hope in her eyes, desperate need for this moment, for beauty and connection and reminder of life before the camp. He can't refuse her, can't walk away, can't deny her this final comfort even though providing it means collaborating with Mengele, means giving legitimacy to the hospital where atrocities occur daily. He plays Schubert's Ave Maria, beautiful and mournful, perfect peace for this moment, for these dying women, for the impossible situation they're all trapped within. The music fills the small room, transcendent despite the circumstances, beautiful despite the horror surrounding it. The women listen in absolute silence, many crying, some praying, all absorbing the sound like water in desert. The Hungarian girl closes her eyes, tears streaming down her wasted face, her lips moving silently. Klein plays for her specifically, focuses his interpretation on her, gives her the music she requested, the comfort she deserves, the beauty that's her right as human being regardless of what the Germans have done to her. When he finishes, the room remains silent for a long moment. Then the girl speaks, her voice barely audible, in Hungarian that Klein doesn't understand but whose meaning is clear in tone and expression. Thank you. Gratitude for the music, for the moment, for the reminder that beauty exists even here. Mengele applauds politely, approaches Klein with satisfaction. Excellent performance. Very moving. I'd like to arrange regular concerts, perhaps weekly, for patients who might benefit. We could establish formal music therapy program, document the results, publish findings after the war. Your participation would contribute to important medical research. Klein feels nausea rising, understands what Mengele is proposing. Turn music into part of the camp's experimental apparatus, use concerts as cover for continued atrocities, make Klein complicit in medical crimes through artistic participation. It's brilliant manipulation, perverse genius, offering Klein survival and purpose while binding him deeper into the camp's criminal machinery. But refusing means no more concerts, means the dying girl never hears music again, means the women in the hospital lose the brief comfort his performances provide. Refusing means Klein loses Weber's protection, returns to regular prisoner status, probably dies within weeks from disease or selection or random violence. Refusing is principled and suicidal both. I would be honored to participate in Dr. Mengele's research, Klein hears himself say, the words ash in his mouth, betrayal of everything he believed about himself, about music, about maintaining integrity under impossible pressure. But the alternative is worse. Silence is worse. Abandoning the dying women is worse. He'll play for Mengele, will allow his music to be used, will collaborate to survive and to provide comfort where no other comfort exists. Mengele smiles, satisfied. Excellent. We'll formalize the arrangement. Hauptscharführer Weber will coordinate the schedule. I look forward to our continued collaboration. The guards escort Klein back to Auschwitz I. He sits in the truck, clutching the violin, his mind numb, unable to process what he's done, what he's become. He's a collaborator now by any definition, performing for the camp's most notorious murderer, participating in medical experiments disguised as therapy. The rationalization that he's helping prisoners, providing comfort, maintaining humanity through music, all of it feels hollow suddenly, excuse for survival that costs too much morally. Back in Block 12 that evening, Klein cannot bring himself to practice, cannot touch the violin, cannot face the instrument that's become symbol of his compromise. Moshe finds him sitting alone, recognizes the crisis, sits quietly beside him for long minutes before speaking. You played for Mengele. The news has spread already. Some prisoners are calling you traitor, collaborator, worse. Others are defending you, saying you brought comfort to dying women, saying the Hungarian girl heard music before she died. Both groups are right. Both are wrong. This is Auschwitz. There are no clean choices, no pure actions. Everything is contaminated by the place itself. Klein nods slowly, unable to articulate the moral confusion consuming him. I thought music was separate, that art could exist apart from the camp's evil, that beauty could remain beautiful regardless of context. But I was wrong. My music serves them now. Serves Weber's cultural pretensions, serves Mengele's experimental facade, serves the camp's machinery by making it seem less monstrous, more civilized. And yet, Moshe says gently, the Hungarian girl died having heard beauty one last time. That counts for something. Not enough to justify everything, but something. We can't measure moral worth precisely in this place. We can only do what seems least terrible in moment of choosing. Klein wants to believe this, wants to accept that survival through compromise is justified, that helping some prisoners excuses collaboration with their murderers. But the belief won't come, the acceptance won't settle. He's crossed line he swore he wouldn't cross, has become what he feared becoming. The violin, his salvation and identity, has become instrument of his moral destruction. The next day, the Hungarian girl dies. Klein learns about it through the camp network, the news traveling quickly despite the distance between Auschwitz I and Birkenau. She died peacefully apparently, hours after his performance, having achieved her final wish. Klein doesn't know whether to feel satisfaction or guilt, whether his music eased her passing or merely prettified her murder. That evening, Klein plays his scheduled concert in Block 12, but differently than before, with edge of desperation in his interpretation, with rawness that transcends technical perfection. He plays Kaddish, the Jewish prayer for the dead, adapted for solo violin, mourning melody that acknowledges loss without surrendering to despair. He plays for the Hungarian girl, for all the dying prisoners, for himself and his compromised soul. The prisoners listen in absolute silence, understanding that something has changed, that Klein has crossed threshold that alters everything. When he finishes, no one speaks, no one moves. They sit in shared grief and recognition, knowing they're all implicated in survival, all compromised by the choices the camp forces on them, all guilty of living while others die. Henrik approaches Klein after the concert, his expression harder than usual. Mengele's protection is valuable. More valuable than Weber's even. If you play for him regularly, if he considers you useful, your survival is nearly guaranteed. You might live through the war, might make it to liberation. Many prisoners would kill for such opportunity. I know, Klein says quietly. That's what makes it so terrible. I want to survive. Want to live to testify, to tell what happened here, to ensure the world knows. But I'm achieving survival by serving the men who created this horror. The contradiction is unbearable. Then don't bear it, Henrik says bluntly. Refuse Mengele's arrangement. Return to regular prisoner status. Die with clean conscience. That's always an option. Nobility through death. The camp provides plenty of opportunities for principled suicide. Klein flinches at the brutal honesty, at the recognition that Henrik is presenting real choice, not rhetorical one. He could refuse, could abandon the violin, could accept death rather than continued collaboration. Many prisoners make that choice, surrender to despair or principle, stop fighting for survival because the cost is too high. But Klein realizes he can't. Despite everything, despite the moral compromise, despite the collaboration, he can't surrender the music. Can't choose silence over sound, can't accept that the violin will be lost again, that beauty will be eliminated, that the Germans will succeed in destroying art along with artists. His survival is compromised, his integrity is damaged, his soul is stained. But the music continues. That has to mean something. Has to justify something. Has to be worth the price he's paying. I'll play for Mengele, Klein says finally. I'll perform in his hospital, will allow my music to be used however he wants. And I'll hate myself for it, will carry the guilt forever, will never believe I made the right choice. But I'll do it anyway. Because the music matters more than my conscience. Because the dying deserve beauty even if I have to compromise my principles to provide it. Because survival, even compromised survival, is better than principled death. Henrik nods, satisfied. Good. Practical choice. The only sane choice really. Welcome to Auschwitz, Klein. Where everyone is guilty and no one is innocent and survival requires accepting the unacceptable. Play your violin. Serve your SS patrons. Help the dying when you can. And live through this hell so you can testify about it later. That's all any of us can do. Klein returns to his bunk, lies awake through the night, listening to the sounds of dying prisoners, the coughs and moans and whispered prayers. He's made his choice, has committed to survival through collaboration, has accepted moral compromise as price of continuing to live. Tomorrow he'll play again, for Weber or Mengele or whoever wants music. He'll play beautifully, will maintain his skill, will create art in the midst of atrocity. And he'll hate himself for it. Will question every choice, will wonder if death might have been more honorable than this corrupted survival. But he'll play anyway. Because the violin sings even in Auschwitz. Because beauty persists even in hell. Because music matters even when everything else is destroyed. These beliefs may be delusions, may be rationalizations for cowardice and collaboration. But they're all he has. All that keeps him human. All that makes survival, however compromised, worth pursuing. The violin of Auschwitz plays on. And Klein plays it. And the music continues. Whatever the cost. Whatever the price. However deeply he's implicated in the machinery of death. The music continues.